Hello, Melissa here with you today, and today is going to be an advanced leggings class. I'm going to show you how to take the basic leggings sloper that we made a couple weeks ago and do things like add different seams, add pockets, add ties and hem details. Basically, anything you can imagine you want your leggings to be, you can make with the skills in this video. So let me show you how to do this. Before we get into the specifics of how I made my specific pair of leggings, let's talk about a general principle of pattern making, which is that once you have a sloper like this legging sloper that I've made based on my measurements, you can cut and add seams anywhere you want on the sloper as long as you add seam allowances. So for example, let's say that I wanted some of those leggings that have stripes that run around the leg. Okay, and maybe I wanted them to go from just under my rear in the back down towards my knee in the front. I could just draw lines of where I wanted the stripe to run. And then I would just cut the pattern in those places and add a seam allowance on each of the cuts. So I would take this center piece, I would retrace it out, add seam allowances on these two sides, and then for this piece and this piece, I would add a seam allowance to where the stripe was, and I would cut on those inner lines there. So I had that seam allowance that could get sewed to the separate stripe piece that I cut. It's really that simple. Anywhere you want to add a seam, you draw in your seam and then you cut and you add seam allowances to your pattern. You could even do a gusset this way. Essentially what a gusset is it's taking this part of the pants and it's making it its own separate piece. So you could cut these two little edges off and then tape these two edges together. Okay, and that would make your little like diamond shaped gusset, and then you'd add seam allowances to it, and your crotch line of your pattern would look like this instead. But there would be your back crotch, your front crotch, and then you would add that gusset in the middle. That's really a very basic pattern drafting principle that once you figure it out and put it into practice, you can make anything once you figure out how to do that. So let me show you specifically what I did to create the leggings that I made out of the sloper that I started with. So I'm starting with a scale model of my basic leggings pattern that I drafted for myself. And the first thing I did was add a side seam. So in order to do that, just going to mark the halfway point between the two crotch points and I'm going to draw a line all the way down and then cut right on that line. You do need to add seam allowances to this. Now, before I go ahead and cut that side seam, there's a couple more things I want to do. Next, I shortened the leggings so that they're kind of capri length, and just drew a new line for where I wanted them to end. Cut that off. And I wanted pockets on my leggings, and I wanted to do kind of a triangular pocket. So I measured out on my body where I wanted the pockets to land and then drew that out from the side seam. So there's going to be my pocket area. And then I measured my phone actually to make sure it would fit in this pocket. I wanted a pocket about like that I could put my phone in. So let's cut this apart and then I'll show you what each of the pieces looked like. So this is my back leggings piece. And here is my front leggings piece, and here is the pocket that I cut out, and I need to add seam allowances to all of these. So let me retrace and show you what that looks like. I'm adding a hem to the top of the pocket and then seam allowances everywhere else. Finally, to add the detail for the wraparound strap, I matched up the inseams that I made, and then I just freehanded a little piece out of the inseam there. So you can see it'll look like that once those inseams are sewn together. And I can trace that onto my pattern as well. Okay, so these pattern pieces plus the waistband piece that was in a different video, that's all that I cut out to put these leggings together. And then I had to freehand measure around my legs, decide how long I wanted those straps to be. And that piece looks like this. And I just curved the end of it. So, cut 2 mirrored fronts, 2 mirrored backs, 2 mirrored pockets and pocket backs, and 4 of these strap pieces. Let's see how these leggings go together now. To start on these leggings, I'm going to prepare the pockets first. So here are my pocket pieces, and then here's the pocket back piece. And you'll notice that I added notches to my pattern of where I'm going to have these match up. So what I want to do first is I'm going to lay both of these right sides up. And then I actually want to sew the hem across the top of each of these first. So I'm just going to press that down for myself, and I'm going to stitch right along that edge. Here's what these look like once I have sewn the hem on top. I just did this with my cover stitch machine. You can use any stretch stitch to hem it, and there's a whole other video I did about hemming knits that I will add a link for below. So once I've got those front parts sewn, I'm going to want to match them to the back parts, and this lower notch here is where I'm matching those up. And then I want to sew the bottoms of my pockets shut so that my phone doesn't slip right through. So I'm going to fold that under, and I'm going to stitch right across that bottom edge to close them up. Here is what my pocket looks like when it's hemmed on top and sewn together across the bottom. And now I'm ready to sew this piece to my front and back leg pieces. So I added this other upper notch here when I cut out the front pieces so that I could match these notches together. So what I'm going to do is place the pocket right sides together with the front leg and match up my edges. Okay, I'm going to stitch right down that edge, and then when I'm done, this is what it's going to look like. Here's the other leg that I started with. So this is now my front leg, and I've got the pocket, and you can see now I've got basically an inseam where I can match this to the back leg. So putting those right sides together, then I'm going to sew this out seam. Let me show you on the pocket area what this ends up looking like. So you can see right here at the bottom of the pocket area, I was serging and I just went right off, and now I've got kind of a, if I press that seam up towards the pocket, I've still got a line where within the seam allowance, I can just match those up, and that will match the end of the pocket cutout on my back leg. And then I can continue down the out seam here. Okay, so I'm going to stitch right across there. Here is what this looks like once I've sewn that back seam. And if I open it up, you can see here is my triangular pocket. And now we're going to work on that little inset that I cut out where I'm going to be putting the band on the side seam here. So the way I like to do these on stretch leggings is I like to go on the seam allowance and do a straight basting stitch on my regular sewing machine. You could make yourself a facing to face this and then sew it, cut it out, flip it to the inside. I like to do it this way. And then what I do is on the wrong side, I use that basting as the line that I'm going to fold against. So the basting is the fold line. And I like to do like the center, maybe a pin or two on the edges. And then I'll stretch this outer edge of my fabric so that I can flat pin with that basting seam at the edge around the curve. Now, this is kind of the quick and dirty method for doing this. A facing would come up with a little bit of a cleaner finish on this, but let me show you what it looks like once you stitch that with a stretch stitch. So I did this on my cover stitch machine, and as you can see, it does look a little bit puckery and stuff, but the reason I do this on leggings is because when I put this on, these are gonna get stretched both ways, vertically and horizontally, and as you can see, once this gets stretched, it pretty much is gonna lay flat. So that's why I go ahead and do the quick and dirty method on here. It just isn't worth the extra time to me to make a facing here when this is all gonna get stretched out when I wear it anyway. So once I have the two pants pieces with those inseam sewn, I can construct the rest of this exactly like I did in the leggings video where I just drafted a flat block, because you can see I've sewn all these pieces together and we're back to what my flat block looked like. And then I can add the waistband like I did in that waistband video. Okay, y'all, following the directions in those other two videos, here are my leggings. I've got the waistband pockets, sewed up all the inseams. The last thing I have is how to deal with adding those bands to the cuffs here. So what I'm gonna do first is I took one set of the band cutouts here and I sewed them together, right sides together, stitch on that short edge. Then what I'm gonna do, take a look at one of the legs here, and I want to fold the band again, right sides together, and I want to match the seam on the band with the inseam of the pants. And then I want to measure out how far the pants go, and I want to make a mark. I'm just going to use a pin to mark it for now, but I'm going to serge this, so I don't want to take that to the serger. And I want to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go from that seam being aligned, measure down, see where the edge of the leg ends, and mark it. Okay, then what I'm going to want to do is complete folding the band right sides together. And I'm going to want to stitch, starting off the fold, all the way around till I hit my mark. And then I want to leave this area open, start at the other mark, and stitch all the way over and then down off the fold. And what that's going to look like when I'm done is this. So you can see I've stitched around that edge and left my opening here, and then I've stitched around and down the other edge. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. Okay, once I've got this all turned right side out, what I'm going to do is match it right sides together with my cuff. And I'm going to stitch right across there, just one side of the band, to sew these together. Okay, y'all, once you have stitched that cuff band onto the pant leg, Then the last step is going to be to fold that final raw edge under and cover up the remaining seam allowance. All the way to the edge there. I like to go ahead and top stitch all the way across to keep this end from rolling. So once that's done, here's what it's going to look like. I did the other leg already. So there is the cuff all sewn, and you can see I chose to use a zigzag stitch to top stitch along the rest of this edge because a zigzag stitch looks the same on both sides. That's it. Once you're done with that, then you're finished with your leggings.